Hey guys, United Physicists here to talk about our current project, the mining rig for Ethereum. So let's take a look at the supplies we need here. We need a motherboard, CPU, GPU, RAM, hard drive, power supply. It's the basic components that are going to go into our computer we're building. You may already have it laying around your home. Use what you have if you can, but today we're going to highlight the specific supplies we use to build our current mining rig. Let's take a look at the video. So that was just a quick video of the first time we turned on our mining rig. Let's look at our first component, the motherboard. Looking at a ASUS Prime Z270 Alpha. It's using an Intel chipset with an 1151 socket. The important thing here is the 270 BIOS. This is going to allow us a lot of options to modify and correct things on the motherboard. It allows us to use 3 16x and 4 1x PCI Express lanes. That's where we're plugging all our graphics cards in, and right now we have 7 running there. We also have 2 M2 slots, very fast for storage. You don't have to use it, you can just use SATA. We opted to go with an one M2 slot for storage, and then we actually put a riser in so we can run 8 graphics cards. And there's 4 slots for RAM. We don't use all 4. You can if you want to make a supercomputer for gaming, but you do not need that. So let's take a look at this image showing all the highlights of this motherboard. We're actually running an HDMI cable off the motherboard's connector, not any of the graphics cards. You can see that along with the USB connectors and the Ethernet port, which we are running an Ethernet cable, but you could hook up a USB Wi-Fi device if you want. Also, you can see the 3 16x lanes are the longer ones and the 4 1x lanes. It's a little harder to see the M2 lanes here, but I'll point that out later on. It also has sound built in, and if you really want to use this as a supercomputer, it's a very good motherboard, but we're just using it for a mining rig. We decided to go with a basic Pentium processor here, the G4400. It's plenty fast, it's 2 cores, 2 threads. We do not need a high-end CPU, an i7 or even an i9 here. We just need a basic one, but you could run a high-end CPU if you want. This is just fine, and it comes in at a very low cost. Next up, we have our RAM. We ended up going with the G.SKILL Aegis DDR4 2133. We got 2 4GB sticks. You could go with just one 8GB. I stick with 8GB for the computers I'm building for mining. You only need 4. I'm just sticking with 8 for future use if files or it gets harder to mine different cryptocurrencies. What's frustrating is this is one of the most expensive parts of the computer. This costs more than our storage, our CPU, and our power supply. Now we're on to our storage device. So first you see is what the first thing we used is, a flash drive. We use this with running Ubuntu, and you could run ethos if you want. I have not messed with that. I stuck with Ubuntu for a while, then we decided to try Windows 10. You can put Windows 10 on a flash drive, but I chose to go with a standard drive. We used a SATA drive with spinning disks, then switched over to a solid state, about the same price. And we're actually running a M2 drive. We just had one laying around, and they're just as cheap. It used to be the case where the M2 was so expensive compared to a flash. The flash was more expensive compared to the spinning hard disk drives. And flash drives, they've always been inexpensive depending on how much storage you get. For our computer now, we are running an M2 drive. It was about $48, $50 off of Amazon. Now we're on to power supply. We went with a Corsair TX 850M unit. This is 80 plus gold rated. We went with 2 units instead of one 1200, 14, or 1600 unit, as it ended up being cheaper. But let me explain what the 80 plus means. It's a voluntary certification program intended to promote efficiency energy use. What does that mean? Well, if we look at our ratings down here, if we look at the regular 80 plus, say we have a 1000 watt power supply, at 80 plus rated, it'll actually give you 800 watts at 100% use. They do this not to confuse consumers, because it used to be when you buy a power supply, they could rate it for whatever, but you would not get that actual power. You'd only get so many watts out of it. And we bought it gold rated, so we're going to get 87% of 850 watts. If we go back, so now with a better understanding of what the gold rated 80 plus standard is, 87% of 850 watts gives us 739.5 watts. We're running 2 of these, so we have about 1480 watts. We don't need all that, running 8 cards. It depends on how you tune these cards, which are coming up next. Okay, now we're on to the graphics cards, the GPUs. This is what's getting the work done for mining Ethereum. The CPU does not matter here, the RAM does not matter. The storage device you have the operating system running on does not matter. What matters for generating Ethereum is the GPU and the memory on the graphics card. So we went with different brands, AMD RX 580s. We have 3 MSI Armors, we have 2 ASUS dual Radeons, we have 2 Sapphire 580s, and then we have 1 XFX. Now each card has different aspects to it, how it's overrated, the stock configuration, but you do need Windows to go in and modify these to give you the peak hash rate, the peak mining power for Ethereum. So you can run this on Ubuntu, it'll run just fine, but if you want to get the most out of these cards, you're going to need to update them and modify them slightly with Windows. And we did that, and I'll go over that in our next video. But more importantly, these put out a lot of heat, and using a cage and some risers to separate these cards will allow it to run cooler, and they will essentially last longer with less heat. So be sure to look at some way of blowing air on it, put it in a cooler environment, but you do not want to box this setup in a closed environment. Okay, if we look at the total cost of this project, our motherboard about $160, processor 58, RAM 88, our storage device, the M2, 48, 2 power supplies at 110 each, 3 MSI cards at 300 each, 2 ASUS cards at 310 each, 2 Sapphire cards at 300 each, 1 XFS at 310, and some miscellaneous storage that I haven't gotten into or talked about, and I will show explicitly in the next video. We bought some aluminum rails, screws to build a frame out of, and then we had to get risers and a couple adapters for our power supply and to be able to plug in our graphics cards into those 1X slots. Those risers are about $50 each. But altogether, this brings us to a total approximately $2,800, which seems like a lot at first, but it's going to take us about 3 months at today's rates to earn that back, mining just Ethereum or dual mining maybe a little bit faster. And with that said, we're getting about 230, 240 mega hash, depending on how we're tuning it. We do have a little ways to go. I'm running at about 225 mega hash right now. I can see myself getting just over 240. So if you're looking for supplies, check the description below the video. I provided some links for the hardware I used in this rig. Unfortunately right now, you'd be hard pressed to find a graphics card, a good one, for less than twice the price of retail. 580s are going around $600 to $700 at the moment. With that said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comments. Click subscribe to see our next video when it's coming out. Should be out by this weekend. And as always, assume nothing, question everything, dare to know.